Should the Minnesota Vikings look to trading out of that 14th overall draft pick? Now, when you take a look at these Vikings needs, there is too many needs for the Vikings to fill in just that 14th overall pick. Yes, the Vikings can use that 14th overall pick, draft a player like Rashawn Slater, Christian Barmore, Kwity Paye. These are players that are clear starters that the Vikings could use. But when you look at it, Vikings have needs, starting needs. These are players that are starting at safety, defensive line, offensive guard. There's multiple spots where the Vikings need core starters that they can't fill in just the first round. And they don't have a second round draft pick on top of that. So, trading out of that 14th overall draft pick would make a lot of sense for the Minnesota Vikings. Now, this is a big question because Vikings fans, a lot of us are really on the fence here because, yes, we could use an offensive guard. But is it worth taking an offensive guard 14th overall? If you can get Rashawn Slater there, yes. Well, if you can get Penei Sewell there, of course, but you're not going to be able to. He's going to go top 4. But if you can get Rashawn Slater at that 14th overall pick, sure, it's worth it because you can move him to left guard and you would make an immediate impact in the NFL. But when it comes down to it, there's a lot of players that can be looking to trading up. Now, after the Vikings are expected to lose Anthony Harris, Jaleel Johnson, a lot of players that have been starting this last season. And obviously, you can throw in Dakota Dozier and Drew Samia if you want, who are also starters this last season, which I think we can agree that we're better off starting anybody over those two players. But after the Vikings are moving on from these players, there is clear needs that the Vikings have at the starting positions that they can't fill in just a 14th overall draft pick. So they will likely have to trade down. And it's very rare that you see this, but Minnesota Vikings trading out of that 14th overall draft pick will help the team a lot. There's a lot of players who can be falling to that 14th overall pick that are not expected to be there that teams can be trading up for. For example, there's one team in particular who was in the playoffs, who is likely going to trade up and need a quarterback this draft, and that is the Washington football team. Who, of course, after cutting Dwayne Haskins, don't have a quarterback. They're using Alex Smith, who, of course, we all love Alex Smith, but once again, he is not going to be the future for the team. They have a guy named Taylor Heineke starting at quarterback. There is possibly a quarterback that can fall to the 14th overall pick, likely Trey Lance if one does, that the Washington football team can trade up for. On top of that, there's a few receivers, 3 receivers, who might be available at the 14th overall pick that teams can trade up for as well. And there's a lot of teams that could use these receivers. I mean, you have Jamar Chase, you have Jalen Waddle, and you have, of course, the Heisman winner, Devontae Smith. If any of these 3 receivers fall to the 14th overall draft pick, teams will be willing to trade up for them. Or Kwity Paye. Now, Vikings could use Kwity Paye, but he is the best defensive end in this draft class. But if he falls to the 14th overall pick, should the Vikings trade out of that? I don't know. I mean, we really could use that player. But at the same time, if there is one of these quarterbacks available, one of these wide receivers, maybe Kwity Paye, who is not expected to be available, Vikings can trade down. Now, why would trading down make a whole lot of sense? Well, when you look at it, what would it mean more for the Vikings? Having a later first-round draft pick and a second-round draft pick, or just the 14th overall draft pick? I think having both first and second round draft picks in the later round would mean a lot more for the Minnesota Vikings. Because in the later first round, you can find some good offensive linemen. There's some good guards that you can be drafting in the later first round, or offensive tackles, and in the second round, and safeties. So if the Vikings can fill the need at offensive guard in the first round, maybe trading with the Washington football team. Now, there's a lot of teams we can be looking at here. I don't have a list completely, but if the Vikings can trade down with one of these teams that made the playoffs who would trade up into the 14th overall pick, Vikings instead are going to be picking in the 20s and somewhere in the 40s in the second round. So if the Vikings can find this and get a good draft pick, get a good couple draft picks first and second round, it would make a whole lot of sense because they can fill 2 needs instead of 1. Vikings would be able to get an offensive guard that they can use, maybe left guard or right guard, doesn't matter. Maybe offensive tackle as well. I mean, Riley Reif will probably not be here another season. Yes, we have Ezra Cleveland, but once again, we don't know we have not seen enough from Ezra Cleveland to say that he's ready to be a starter. So if the Vikings can maybe get one of these players in the later first round and maybe one of these safeties in the second round, now these are where the players are expected to be drafted, you would fill 2 needs for the Minnesota Vikings. Now, yes, it wouldn't make as much of an impact as maybe getting Rashawn Slater or Kwity Paye. These are some players that are possibly going to be available at the 14th overall pick, but you'd fill 2 needs instead of 1. So should the Vikings trade down? It's hard because you look at this Vikings defensive line now. you can fill this role in the third and fourth round. Vikings may not have very many picks in their day 1, day 2. They don't have a pick in the second round. They only have 1 pick in the first round. So there's not a whole lot that the Vikings have here, but there's a lot of picks that they have in both the third and fourth round that they really racked up because of the Stephon Diggs trade. They really racked up on the third and fourth round draft picks where they can fill those defensive linemen. Now, I'm okay with the Vikings not taking a defensive lineman until the fourth round. And that's an unpopular opinion because Vikings are very successful at drafting defensive linemen. And this is because of Andre Patterson, who was one of the best defensive coaches in the NFL. I love what I see from Andre Patterson, and I am a big Andre Patterson guy, and not drafting a defensive lineman in the first round would be completely understandable. Because you look at the Vikings' track record of defensive linemen that they've drafted in the later rounds. I mean, Everson Griffin was drafted in the 5th round. Danielle Hunter was drafted, I think, 4th round. It might have been 3rd round. DJ Wanham was drafted in the 4th round. Now we have James Lynch, 5th round draft pick. We have Armon Watt, 6th round draft pick. Basically, our Shamar Stephen, 7th round draft pick. Michael Pierce, undrafted. No, yes, he was undrafted free agent and picked up by the Ravens, so we're not going to count him. Our entire defensive line weren't even drafted in the first 2 rounds. So not drafting a defensive lineman round 1, although I really wanted to see it happen, not drafting Kwity Paye, not drafting Christian Barmore, this might be a loss when you look at it, but in the future, it might just make more sense to go offensive guard and safety in the first 2 rounds. Because Vikings have been very successful in drafting defensive linemen. Just drafting talented guys and really drafting athletic guys and just giving them talent, working them into the starting role is really what we saw from this Vikings defense coaching staff for some time now, and I'm all on board with that if the Vikings instead go with offensive line in the first round, safety in the second, and then defensive in the fourth round maybe. 3rd round, they can go corner. I mean, you look at it, where players are expected to be drafted, it just makes sense for the Vikings to trade down. Yes, we wouldn't get a player like Rashawn Slater. We wouldn't get a player like Kwity Paye. We wouldn't get a player like Christian Barmore. But we'd be able to fill so many more roles that the Vikings could have. And they wouldn't need to draft a defensive lineman until the 4th round. Where all in all, when you look at it, Vikings can get some good defensive linemen in the 4th round. And linebackers. This is where the Vikings can be really swinging on some very good picks in the 4th round for the Minnesota Vikings. And then after that, you can just take, obviously, best player available. Maybe find a kicker. I mean, I'm not a fan of drafting kickers, but it's a need for the Vikings. Taking a kicker maybe 7th round would make sense. I'm more of a fan of going for the undrafted kickers. But we'll take a look at how the Vikings can fill this role. It's going to be very interesting for the team because with all the needs the Vikings have, they can't fill this in just the first round. I mean, when you look at it, because of this Kirk Cousins contract, we have needs across the board on defense. And a big need at both left guard and right guard, where they can draft left guard and right guard in the first few rounds. In fact, Vikings can go guard in round 1 and round 2. Now, I've been a fan of the Vikings taking all defense this draft, but if Vikings go guard in both round 1 and round 2, if they trade down, they could get some good guards. There's good guards that are expected to be drafted there. So I wouldn't take my word for it, but from what I've heard, from what I've seen through mock drafts, from what I've seen through PFF, you can find good guards in the 1st and 2nd round, where it would make a lot of sense for the Minnesota Vikings to be swinging on players there. So let me know what y'all think. Would trading down be completely stupid? Because yes, I can agree. I want to see Christian Barmore and Kwity Paye or Rashawn Slater so much in Minnesota Vikings uniform. I want to see any of those 3 players I just named so much in Vikings uniform. But if we trade down, it might just mean more for the team. So let me know what y'all think.